I grew up in rural Michigan, where there was nothing to do if you didn't like looking at trees and fields. I didn't hate nature, but I always wanted to live near a bigger city. When I was 13, my parents often left me home alone because they believed I was mature enough. One weekend, I was playing Vice City on the PS2 in the living room when I suddenly heard a loud metallic noise coming from outside. I immediately ran to every window to look outside, and when I got to the window that looked out onto the back shed, I saw that the shed door was wide open. I felt nervous and decided to go get something to defend myself. I yelled, "Who's there?" but got no answer. When I got to the door, I made it clear that I had, before looking inside. The inside of the shed was a mess of a lot of stuff: a lawnmower, a four-wheeler, and a bunch of small gardening tools. Someone could be hiding behind anything in there. Even though I was a kid, I wasn't easily scared, but I felt really uneasy at that moment. I closed the shed door and went home, locked the door, and sat by the window to watch the shed. After a while, I decided to call my dad for advice. I went to the kitchen to call the landline and called his cell phone, but he didn't answer. I left a message and went back to the window. I turned on a TV show to ease the tension, but then I heard a creaking sound from upstairs. My heart was about to jump out of my chest. I wondered if I was imagining things, but I knew I had to check. I grabbed my self-defense gear and quietly went up the stairs. I didn't call out because I didn't want the intruder to know I had heard him. I reached the top of the stairs and turned on the hallway light. There were 5 doors to open, all of which were closed. The creaking sound came from my parents' bedroom. I knelt down and looked through the crack in the door, seeing 2 bare feet standing on the other side. My stomach clenched. I realized that I was not ready to threaten or, for heaven's sake, hurt anyone. I ran downstairs and hid in the bathroom to call my dad again. He still didn't answer. I left another message and called 911. I whispered into the phone and explained the situation. I was told to stay in the bathroom and not say a word. I heard footsteps approaching the bathroom door and stopping. A deep male voice said, "Hey kid." I wanted to cry with fear. I yelled that I was calling the police and that I had self-defense gear. The operator asked me to confirm the situation. The intruder tried to open the door, but when he realized it was locked, he left. I heard the footsteps fade away, and then the back door closed. The police arrived and checked the house, confirming that the intruder was gone. I stayed at my uncle's house that night. When I was 18, my parents went away for a week for their anniversary, leaving me to look after the house. My family's house was in the woods with a dirt road leading off the main road. It was a quiet street, and all the houses were a fair distance apart. One day, I was filling up at a gas station when a black Jeep Cherokee pulled up next to me. A bearded man got out, greeted me, and started filling up. He asked me for directions to the freeway, and I tried to give him directions. He wrote down the directions on a piece of paper, which I found strange since everyone had cell phones these days. I went back home and thought it was all over. That night, when I went out to meet friends, I heard footsteps near the house. I didn't pay much attention, thinking it might be wild animals. But when I returned home, a voice from the woods called my name, "Kate." I panicked and quickly went inside. The next day, I stayed home all day, and at night, when I was about to go out again, I heard the voice again. This time I didn't hesitate. I ran into the house and called 911. The police came to check but found nothing. They told me to call back if the situation continued. The next day I had to go to work. When I returned home after my shift, I heard footsteps near the house. I didn't dare go out to check. That night when I was trying to sleep, I heard a knock on the window again. I looked out and saw the man from the day before with a creepy smile and a weapon in his hand. I panicked and called the police. The police came, and after a thorough check, they told me to stay at a friend's house that night. I went to my friend's house and called my parents. The next day they came home, and I felt safer. I believe the man at the gas station was following me and trying to break into my house. Back then I was a teenager, 15 or 16, and I often played games all night. One Saturday night, the whole family was out, and I was immersed in a game of StarCraft on the computer in the downstairs bedroom. In the middle of an intense match, the doorbell rang twice. I rushed to the door, not wanting to be away from the game for too long for fear of losing. Standing in front of the door, I asked, "Who is it?" A weak but unclear voice came from the other side of the door. It seemed to be a woman. I opened the main door, but left the screen door between us. In front of me was an older woman with a strange smile and her hands behind her back. She said she needed to borrow her phone and asked if she could come inside. Ever since I was a child, I had always been taught never to let strangers into my house, no matter who they were. I felt awkward but still refused and directed her to the nearby library, even though I knew it was closed. Her smile did not fade, but her next words did not match her smile at all. "It's rude to refuse an old lady who needs help." I could only repeat the family rule of not letting strangers into the house, then slowly close the door while apologizing. She just stood there, her smile still intact but giving off a more terrifying feeling than ever. I went back to my room and continued playing the game. Not long after, I heard a light knock on the window. It sounded like metal hitting glass. The window was right in front of my desk, and the curtains were drawn so I couldn't see outside. At this point, I knew for sure it was the old lady. I muted the game, no longer in the mood to continue playing. The metallic clanging continued to ring steadily, making me panic. I decided not to open the window and move to another room. I sat in the darkness of the living room, listening. The doorbell rang again, this time 4 times in a row. I couldn't stand it anymore and decided to open the door to ask what she needed. But when I opened the door, there stood a man who looked about 10 years younger than her. He said through the screen door, "Have you seen my mother?" I replied that she had been here before. He apologized and explained that my mother was confused and had gotten lost. I felt a little guilty, but then he asked if he could come in. The awkwardness set in again. Why did he want to come in? I refused and told him to go around the back of the house to look for my mother. He thanked me and went down the path. I thought he had gone around the back, but when I looked through the back window, there was no one. This made me even more suspicious and afraid. That night, I went to bed early, leaving the TV on to help me fall asleep. I was sound asleep when I was awakened by the sound of metal hitting the window. This time I decided to do something. I lifted the curtains and saw the woman standing outside, still smiling, but this time she had a sharp object in her hand. I panicked, lowered the curtains and went back to bed. Not long after, the doorbell rang again, this time 4 times in a row. I knew this couldn't be a normal lost person. I decided not to open the door and waited. The next morning, I told my father everything over the phone. He said I did the right thing by not opening the door. The whole family agreed that it could be a robbery. I still wondered if the woman was really confused and if the man was really her son. But everything was too coincidental and strange. From then on, I was more cautious and never opened the door to strangers, no matter how pitiful they seemed. I knew I had avoided something terrible by not opening the door.